Thank you, Robert, for having me here today, and thank you everyone for coming this evening to this meetup. So today I'm going to be talking about testing in React and advanced testing because we are in the advanced React meetup. And I would like to start with telling you a little secret. Maybe some of you don't know, but I'm a senior software engineer, and I'm extremely good at writing bad code on the first try. So, but I think I'm not alone. You know Adi Osmani, if you know him, he's quite well known and popular in the community. He says that, you know, first you need to do it, then you do it right, and then you do it better. But it's everything about the iteration, sorry. So please raise your hand if you can relate to that thing that, you know, it's really hard to make something when we build software. You know, no matter how hard we try, but how much we study and we improve, but building something great the first time, it's really difficult. Okay, cool. So hopefully this will be interesting for you. So I wonder why. Why is that the case? Is it my fault? And let me tell you, I think it's not our fault. It's just the nature of the building software. It's very complex. Building software is complex. And I'm going to define complexity in the context of this talk as something where the unknowns, there are many unknowns that we don't know, right? So there are many things that we still don't know that they're going to happen. We don't know very well the requirements we're going to build. Maybe the requirements are going to change. Maybe the technology is going to change. There are so many things that we don't know that it makes it a complex problem. Actually, someone said that building software is a discovery process. We are in a process of discovering the solution. And I think the more we iterate, as Osmani was saying, the more we iterate, the closer we are to that solution. And it seems to me that the more tests we write, the more we can iterate, which for some people sounds a bit counterintuitive, right? Because I heard, you know, if we don't have time to write tests. We heard we don't have time to write tests. So someone in the company said we don't have time to write tests. And, you know, it might be true if you build something and you never change it. But this is not the reality where we live, right? Things change continuously, and so we need to iterate. And so writing tests is a good investment. I'm sure everyone here agrees on that. But I want to touch on a little thing before we actually see some code. And the thing is, we don't work in isolation. We work with other people. And different people might have different, you know, they might perceive a different value. And I would like to touch on that before we start. The first category is four groups of people. The first one is users. So if we automate tests, we'll probably write fewer bugs. So we'll have happier users, which is good. The second thing is, if we write tests, we might be able to write new features faster or update the features we have with new functionality. And that's going to make very happy our users, and of course the product owner, project manager, stakeholders, they're going to be super happy. Also, we can document code if we write tests, and this is good for our colleagues, right? So we're going to have happier colleagues. And I'm sure all these things you might know already. I mean, it took me a while until I realized that actually who benefits from doing this. And I think it's important because we work with people. And there is one person that I'm missing here, which is you, right? And it's called refactoring. Because the more tests I have, the more I can refactor. If I don't have tests, or my tests are not good, we'll see what I mean by good, then I'm not going to write tests, or I'm not going to refactor my code. And if I don't refactor my code, I know that I'm not going to write good code. So this is a very important thing. So I think, you know, if you want to be a happier developer, you should try to refactor your code and be in a space where we can refactor code. Now, I use two metrics to evaluate what a good test is. One is code refactoring, as you can guess, and the other one is confidence. right? And I'm going to define confidence by how likely it is that you deploy code on a Friday at 5 p.m., right? Because I know some companies that have this policy, we don't deploy code on a Friday. Who doesn't deploy code on a Friday, or who's in a company like it's like, but other companies, they deploy code automatically when you push onto master. So if you push some code on a Saturday morning, that will go to production. Who's in a place like this where you can push code and it goes directly to production? So it's a very different kind of level of confidence, right? And that's the two things that I'm going to use to define my code is, or my test is good or is bad. But I encourage you to have your own metrics and just don't follow what I'm saying here. So my name is Alex Lobera, and I'm a developer at LeanJS, and I'm also a developer coach at React GraphQL Academy. So at React GraphQL Academy, we help the professional developers to build React and GraphQL products the right way. We try to help people to think what is the right tool for the right problem, because there are so many tools in the React ecosystem that is really important to know when and how to use things. Now, I also love to remove code. That's one of my passions. I don't know, have a look at your GitHub and see if, because I don't, it's like, there's so much pleasure I get when I write one line of code and I remove two. It's like, it's amazing. So, I don't know, just try to do those things. It's just one passion. So I was thinking, what should I talk in this advanced testing in React? Because there are many things we can talk about testing, and there are nothing that I can find, I'm sure, that I explain and no one knows. And I was like, so what is still relevant nowadays for this amazing audience that you are, this React Advanced in London? So I was thinking, and I have to say that until a few days ago, I was not sure about what to talk about. Luckily, I got something. So, but I'll tell you how I came up to this. So I was in some Slack channel, one of those Slack channels that we might be in, also hundreds of Slack channels that we join. And so I saw a conversation. And so I changed the names of these people because, to protect, for privacy reason. So one person is called Watermelon. Actually, Watermelon is in this room. Might be a bit kind of smiling. I see you are smiling, Watermelon. But they don't know you are here. They don't know who you are. Now you are laughing. So Watermelon presented us this problem. And this was actually a week ago. And he was saying, look, I have an issue testing this. There's this component that has this Brexit model, blah, blah, blah. And this is using Enzyme. Who knows what Enzyme is? Okay. So he was trying to test this, and he was asking for some advice. Then Mushroom said, you need to do this. But the interesting bit is when Spinach came into the picture and said, run away from Enzyme. That's the problem. And then Mushroom came up with some solution, and that made me think, and at that point I joined the conversation. And the first thing I thought is, man, if you're doing something about Brexit, you don't need to test it, because this is going to go wrong, right? So when you deploy this, it's not going to work. But, then after that, the serious thing is, I think we're not testing the right thing. It's not about the tool we're using. And then I shared this article. Who knows this article? Mocking is not a code smell. It's very interesting. Basically, it says, it doesn't say mocking is bad. So mocking, the idea of mocking is, my code has a dependency. And I don't want that dependency to be executed in a given context for whatever reason. So I want to change that for something else. So when you mock that dependency, you can do other things that might be more convenient in that context. So this is not inherently bad, because all the code has dependencies. So the thing is, he's saying, watch out, because when you fundamentally are mocking something, it means you know something, right? If I have some code that talks to an API and I mock the fetch API, I know that it's a fetch. So if I change that for jQuery tomorrow, my code will break. So mocking is fundamentally implementation details. You are manipulating implementation details. And which is not bad because all our applications will have some implementation details, right? Then I thought, okay, I know what I'm going to talk about. So the idea is to critically explore some testing principles and libraries, compare both, and so come up with our own conclusions about which library is good, is bad, and which principles are good or bad. Because I think you can apply almost any principle with any library if you know how to do it. So I built some application, which I'm going to go and have a look now. I'll show you the demo of the application. It's a Facebook Messenger. I don't have many friends, but luckily I have one friend who knows a lot about testing. You know who this person is? Yes. So, and I asked for some advice, and I said, look, I don't know what to do. Actually, I was indecisive between doing some slides or some coding, and then I thought, coding must be more fun. He said, well, be careful because it might not work, and I said, okay, I'll try it anyway. Hope this is running. Yes. So I can send messages. Hi there. Are you still there? I think it's not online. It's not going to work. This is a localhost application. But I think it's an interesting case, and I'm going to write 3 tests. So I'm going to do some live coding. Hopefully it's going to work. And if it doesn't work, I guess it's fine. You won't mind. So I'm running the application here. I'm going to run the test in here using Jest. So I'm going to filter this chat, which now is working. So actually we're going to get into the interesting bit, which is coding. So let me show you the code very quickly. There is a lot of code there's a certain amount of code in this application. But I thought an interesting case is this case that I just did, sending a message. I want to make sure that my application can send a message, whatever it means. So there are different strategies and different tools I can use. So let me show you the messages. There are some implementations here, some design decisions. Hope you don't judge much. There is style components for styling, and then we have some functional component which has some hook for the state. And then when we send a message, we send a message to a given API that I have here. And I have this into Redux. Yeah. So I thought it was an interesting case. And yes, you could refactor this in different ways. You could move this into different files, but I thought it was a nice idea to have everything, especially in this talk, in one file. And also I removed some complexity from here, like I'm not going to handle the try-catch. I'm going to just test the happy path. But hopefully it will be interesting enough to compare the 2 approaches, which is the point. And then to come up with our own conclusions. So I wrote this messages test. Actually, I thought initially I was going to have 20 minutes instead of 30, so I just wrote the first test before, so it's written. The first test I want to do, let me collapse this. I'll show you the 3 tests. The first one, if you read this, they are all going to test the same, but I will use different tools and different strategies. So one will be a unit test, the one will be an integration test with Enzyme, and the other one will be an integration test with React testing library. And then we'll explore the differences. So for the first one, because I want to write a unit test, we'll define unit in this context as a component. One component will be a unit. So because I want to test this behavior, and I want to find a unit in these messages that can help me test that, I will go for the messages components, which I'm exporting here, right? I can click on this, and I will go to here, right? So notice the curly braces. The other thing I'm going to do is a shallow, because in Enzyme you can do different types of rendering. With React testing library, there's only one way, and here you have a choice. But because I want to test a unit, I don't want to test the children of the children, and so on. I just want to test the messages. So I will shallow, and I want to pass some props. This fake API is interesting, because my API, my messages requires an API, And what I'm doing is I'm importing this here. So what I could do is I could do this here. But there is a fundamental difference. If I do this, when I mock, what do I need to do? Well, I need to Google. I'm not very good at mocking, actually. And I'm very proud of that in using this library because I don't use it very often. Which hopefully, according to that article, I'm doing right. So I don't want to do this because Jest is a mocking library. Sorry, Jest is a library for JavaScript. And the mocking system is really complex, can do a lot of things for a lot of use cases in JavaScript. Now, I'm in React. So in React, I have something very cool, which is a prop. So I can just move this dependency that I have here into a prop and provide a default value. So now my API is whatever I provide here. If I don't provide anything, it gets the real API. So the users, the components that use my component, won't specify any API. They don't care about that implementation detail, and my component will go to the internet. But in my test, I don't want this to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just saying that API is something else. Actually, my implementation is also a fake. It just returns a promise, result true. So what I'm going to do in my test is do the same. I'm going to return a promise, but I'm going to watch. I'm going to have a spy on this function, so I will be able to ask questions later. So what is the next thing I want to do? Well, I typed some text here, and then I sent the message. I want to do the same thing in my test, so I'm going to, with Enzyme, I'm going to find my input. And look at this, I'm actually looking for an input component, which for some people this might look really bad. Who thinks this is a bad idea? A few people. Who thinks it's a good idea? Who doesn't think? But anyway, we got different opinions, right? Which is interesting. I don't know. Because if you read React testing library, they say this is not a good idea. You should do this. But we'll see. Anyway, my goal is to find that input, add some text, find the button, and click on the button. So after that, what do I do? Because my API is a promise, it will go to the internet. I don't know for how long. So what do? You need to wait. For how long? We don't know. So there is this nice utility, wait for expect, that what it will do is it will try to satisfy this expectation. If this asserts correctly, then it will pass. If it doesn't, we'll wait a few milliseconds, then it will try again. A few milliseconds, it will try again, until it will say, this is too much, it's never going to work. I don't know if it's for 4 seconds. We could try because this is actually running. So I could say now that this should be hider 2. Therefore, it's trying, it's trying, it's trying, it's trying, and at some point it will say, look, it didn't work, right? I was expecting this, and you got that. So, now let's do the interesting thing. Who is confident? This is, you can deploy this, you make some changes in these messages, and you can deploy this on a Friday, and just because the test works, the application is going to work. Who is not confident at all? Who is a bit confident? Who is very confident? Well, let's see, I don't know. I could change. What if I break in my component? What if I remove this Redux thing? It didn't work. So I had that, was nice. But what if I actually don't connect my dispatch to this Redux? Or I get the state. It's working. So I made some changes, but I'm not covering those changes, which is the nature of a unit test. I'm testing that unit. So some people would just keep testing units, And so that takes time, but someone else said, look, we can write an integration test. So the idea of the integration test is I'm gonna test a few units, components in this context, and I will test them together. And so I'll see how they interact with each other. And this is very interesting because we can test things that are closer to what the users do. So for the other one, which is gonna be very similar, well, I have some questions for you here. So you think this test knows implementation details or not? Who thinks knows a lot of implementation details? It knows quite a few. No, it doesn't know any detail. It's back? Yeah. So there are a few implementation details we know here. I know there is an API call. What if I move this to GraphQL tomorrow? What if I use Axios? I will need to change things here. What if I remove Redux? This is a big thing. What if I remove Redux from my application because it's not good anymore? Do I need to change here things? Yeah, we'll need to change this. So it doesn't give me a lot of confidence because if I change things like this, my test works, but my code doesn't. So I'm not very confident. And it's not very flexible because I know implementation details. If I remove Redux, I will need to change my test. So let's see the other approach, which I'm gonna write an integration test. So what's an integration test? As I said, is I'm gonna put few components together and see how they work. So now what I want to test, still want to make sure that I can send a message. But I'm not gonna test the messages. I wanna test this thing, which is everything. All the composition together. This is what I export. Some people would call this connected messages, maybe. I like composed because it's about composition. So I'm gonna change the name of this. I'm gonna just save and see what happens. Boom, first error, yeah. Now I'm using connect. Connect needs a store. So I'm gonna add a store. I'm gonna just follow this. So the store, I'm gonna put it here. It's gonna be, I have this configure store function that will create a store for me. Now let's see what happens. We're getting some error expression. Okay. So this is a cool thing about JS. I don't know if you have this in your workflow. You can have your test running and you are executing and changing the code, which is super cool because it's giving you feedback all the time. Who uses this on watch mode while coding? This is very useful. The drawback is you need to have tests, right? So if you don't write tests, you're not going to be able to do this. So the next thing I want to do, I want to mount because I want to render not only the connect, but all the components that are in that file. So now when I do this, boom, I get this act thing, which is a new thing in React 18.8, which is very interesting because they're telling us something like, you're testing the behavior the user would see in the browser. You need to make sure about that. Cool. Actually, also what React testing library says, they say you need to be very close to how the user is used, how the software is used, how the user uses the software, which is nice. We see like similar opinion, which is good. So the next thing I'm gonna test, I'm gonna fix this, so I will actually copy this thing. So it's the code that causes React state updates. So who's that? Is this component. So now it will still break because my fetch is asynchronous. So I have my async, so I'm gonna await, also here. So now this should be happier. Oof, it's not happy. Okay, it's not happy because I still have the previous test, the previous expectations. So now we need to check that this works. And now we're in a more interesting scenario because now I could go to the UI, right? When I send a message, I send a message to the API, promise results. I send a message to Redux. Redux will say there is a new message. I will get a new message from the state. The component will re-render, and so I will see my message on the screen. That looks like I could test this. It would be very interesting. So what I'm going to do is check that that is expectation. I'm going to look for the, yeah, this is interesting as well. What are you looking for? So you could look for a text. You could look for, I don't know, a CSS class. So I'm going to continue doing this message, this component thing. I'm going to use a component, which, as you click here, is this component. That is what I'm rendering in this list. So if there is a message component, means there is a message. So I could say this, so this is an array to be 1. And actually I can say that before it was 0. It's not going to work because I forgot. I always forget this. This is one of also the criticisms with React Enzyme. You need to explicitly say, I want you to update. So you will need to do this every time. So now it's happy, it's working. I was able, let's make sure that actually it doesn't work if I can make it fail. It's trying. So it will fail eventually. Good. So what about this? What is your degree of confidence here? If I remove, I don't know, this thing, remove the state, bam, I got something, some error, very nasty error. But it gives me more confidence now because I'm closer to what the user does. And this is good. Can I change, refactor my code? Do I know implementation details? What if I want to change Redux from my app? Do I need to change something here? Yeah, we'll have this store here. So we could do something like, you know, this would work, but you can write tests, depending on what are your metrics, what is important for you. I want to write tests that is easy to refactor. So I'm going to create some abstraction there. So I don't want to say any Redux thing there. So I will get this component, and I'm going to return, I guess I'm importing the provider, yeah. So I will get some children. And of course I need the store, which I'm going to create here. What did I do? And I'm going to create this store here. So this is now interesting because, yeah, I can move this to a different file. We don't know this exists in here. And I'm going to use it in my component. So I could do something like this. And I can get rid of the store. My test should work. Good. So now I feel that if I remove Redux from my app, do I need to change anything in my test? Does my test know anything about Redux? It doesn't. So that gives me a lot of flexibility. What about other implementation details? What if I change to GraphQL? Do I need to change anything in my test? What about this? This is another implementation detail. Can I get rid of this? Unfortunately, no. So is this is it the perfect test? It's not. Is what is a black box? Meaning, do I know implementation details? Yes, I know a few, but I know less than I definitely knew when I had the store here, and even less when I was using this test. So to me, this is giving me, it's a good test. regardless of the tool and maybe the verbosity of this enzyme, because I have a good confidence this will work, high degree of confidence, and I also know that there are a lot of things I can change, like Redux, removing Redux from my app, and it will work. And just to finish up, I'm going to uncomment this. So this other test is the same test, integration test, same functionality. I'm going to use the React testing library. I still need to mock my API. I'm using my root component. You have a headups here. So I need to find a message. How do I find the message? Because in testing library, I cannot use components. I need to use something that is very, very close to the UI. Some string, some class, some data ID. So I'm going to go for this data ID. I'm going to add it here. So now my messages have this. Let's see if this works. Yes, it works. So I identify if I have messages. I don't have any message. I fire an event. Different API, great. This is still the same because this is the shape of the DOM event has this target and value, so we cannot change that no matter what your library we use. Then I'm gonna find the button. I'm looking for the send text because I have some send, and I will wait. I'm using this wait from the library, but actually React testing library is using this wait is a wrapper for this, so you could also use this. And I'm doing the same. I'm just doing the same thing I did with Enzyme, but I'm doing it with this React testing library. So to finish with this, what are the benefits I get from using React testing library in this case? I don't see a lot of them. So, and going back to that conversation I saw on Slack, the thing I see with React testing library is that it actually forces you to do these things. In Enzyme, you can really mess up a lot. So you need to know the things you do. Now the thing is, that person who's working in that project, he told me, I didn't choose Enzyme. You know, they chose it. But if you actually know the principles, even in that company they use Enzyme, you can apply the same principles that you would use with React testing library. And so those principles for me are about writing code that is very easy to reuse, very easy to refactor, and it has a high degree of confidence that if I refactor my code, my test won't break. Otherwise, I'm not going to refactor my code. And I like to write good code. That's it. Thank you very much.